What's up, guys? Tim Little. Welcome back to Tactical Bassin. Today's video, I have some tips and tricks, some bait modifications to help you guys catch more fish this winter on reaction baits. Today we are inside because it is coming down. Thunderstorms today and tomorrow like crazy. So it's time to kind of go through my gear, change out hooks, change out split rings, make sure things aren't rusting. You know, New Year's, hopefully you guys had a good New Year's. Happy New Year's. If you guys, if we haven't said it already or didn't see our New Year's video. But Happy New Year's, and hopefully 2022 is an amazing fishing season, fishing year for you guys. But today, like I said, it is coming down outside, so I'm inside changing hooks, checking on baits, making sure I'm pulling swim baits off my underspin so they don't rust, just kind of taking care of a lot of things, doing some organizing. But today's video, I got 5 or 6 different techniques that I typically like to use in the wintertime. Either throwing a jerk bait, an Alabama rig, a blade bait, a crankbait, a glide bait. So for each of those techniques, I have a tip or two for you guys that will hopefully give you more confidence and help you guys catch more fish. Like I said, great time to go through your gear. Make sure you get your guys' new fishing licenses, go through your reels, loosen the drags. Just when the winter storms come, it's a great time to still think about fishing and get all of your gear organized, cleaned up, taken care of. That way, the next time you head to the lake, you're all set. But today's video a little bit different, but want to talk about reaction fishing this time of the year. Like I said, throwing a jerk bait, a crankbait, speed cranking in cold water, an A-rig, blade bait, glide bait. So going to talk about some key techniques that I really like doing this time of the year and some tips to help you to catch more fish. So let's start off talking about the A-rig. You know, the Alabama rig is one of my go-to confidence baits, you know, any time of the year, especially in spring and definitely in the winter time. You know, as those fish are schooling up, they're chasing the bait fish, it's really hard to beat an Alabama rig when you're trying to catch fish that are chasing balls of bait, because it doesn't get any better than that when you're trying to mimic a school of bait. So a couple tips for you guys. The first tip is water clarity. You know, we've talked about that in previous videos, but if you have gin clear water, as your body of water cools down, typically you get clearer water, and not all the time will you need a lot of flash, a lot of vibration. You'll actually get more bites and bigger bites throwing a rig that doesn't have blades on it. So the Tactical Flex rig without blades, just your 6 wires, you know, with your dummy baits, your teaser baits, and then your swim baits on the bottom. But what I want to talk about is switching out to gold blades, chartreuse blades, smaller blades, bigger blades. Depending on your water clarity, it's really easy to adjust your Alabama rig to the conditions. You know, if you're fishing, say you get an early storm, now that we're in the early part of the year, you get an early storm and all the creeks blow out and turns your fishery to chocolate milk, all those fish are gonna run to that warmer water, but it's gonna be stained, it's gonna be muddy. So now, think about changing out the blades on your A-rig. Think about going with something a little bit more bright, you know, just like you would a spinnerbait, right? You're not always gonna throw a silver or a gold blade spinnerbait. It's super easy. You just change the right there on the swivel, there's a little split ring. Just pop that off and pop on your new blade, and it's good to go. So think about, should you be throwing a rig with blades? And then if yes, think about, do I need to throw smaller, you know, blades? Are my fish chasing real small bait and throwing bigger bait? Do I want bigger, more vibration? So just like you would adjust your spinner bait, you can adjust your Alabama rig. And then the other tip I want to give you, especially this time of the year with a lot of those fish going deep, you want to be able to keep your rig down. Let me show you guys. I got all sorts of stuff going on over here trying to organize, but that's what these stormy days are great for. So you can see we got our 3 dummies right there, no hooks on them, and we have our 3 hooked baits down here. Larger swim bait in the back. Typically, they're going to eat the biggest, farthest back swim bait on your A-rig. But what I want to talk to you guys about, you know, I've been playing a lot with the new forward-facing sonar, you know, the Mega Live, and that thing is unbelievable. But not just for fish catching, actually for dialing in your crankbaits, your A-rigs, your jerkbaits. Now you can see really how deep your bait is actually getting. So for you guys that like to throw A-rigs in the wintertime in deeper water, 25, 30 feet, 35 feet of water, a lot of us will put heavier heads to keep that rig down. We don't want to throw that thing out there, hit bottom, start bringing it back, and that thing just start creeping up because we're throwing too light of heads. So a lot of us like to throw a little bit deeper, more heavier A-rig. The tip I want to give you, instead of going with 3 identical heads, I will typically go with the heavier head in the middle and 2 lighter heads on the outside. Now the reason being, so this right here has 3 of the same heads and they are all a 1/4 ounce. When I go to cast this thing, these wires are gonna compress and sometimes they're gonna foul up, they're gonna hook each other. If you have really heavy heads on the outside, when you go to really send that thing, it's gonna, that weight is gonna collapse that wire, especially with these lighter wires, and it's gonna foul up your bait more often. So, tip for you, take a heavier, if you wanna run a 2/4 on the outside and run a 3/8 or a 1/2 ounce straight back, that bait is not gonna condense, it's not gonna foul up on the 2 outer baits, and with there being less weight on the outside, you guys are gonna save yourself a ton of headaches casting A-rigs, because it really, really sucks when you get to the spot, you go to make your cast, as you see your Alabama rig hit the water, you see all the wires crossed up, and you literally just wasted your cast. So that is 2 tips for you guys for Alabama rigs. Like I said, it's one of my favorite ways to catch them this time of the year, favorite ways to fish. Pay attention to water clarity, if you need or don't need blades, and then play around with changing the size and color of your blades, just like you would on a spinnerbait. And then, like I said, pay attention to that, to the outer weights on that A-rig so you don't get fouled up. But wintertime reaction fishing, you guys know that we love doing it. You know, it's not only dragging a worm, shaking a shaky head, or a Ned rig, or a jig. You know, you can really, really catch some nice quality big fish throwing reaction baits in the winter time. So that's typically what I start out with 99% of the time. Let's go ahead and talk about jerk baits, because a jerk bait, to be completely honest, I really like throwing a glide bait over a jerk bait. It's just my personal preference. Growing up on the West Coast, being there during that glide bait boom, I just have more confidence with the glide bait. I feel like they kind of target the same fish. Obviously, you're throwing a lot bigger glide baits. It's funny, look at all the teeth marks on the back of this guy right here. But I'm going to talk about both today, because I know there's guys that love throwing jerk baits. There's guys that love throwing glide baits. But let's talk about jerk baits. Now, again, being able to watch your lure in real time, you can really dial in your baits. It's not all about seeing the fish and seeing them react to your bait. You know, I'm going to do a more in-depth Mega Live video. The more that Matt and I get, we want to be really good with it, and we're still trying to dial it in, learn it, see what we're seeing, learn what we're seeing. So we'll do a more in-depth, but just a real brief thing about it. It's been awesome. It's been completely eye-opening. I've preached for a long time, or said for a long time, that the last frontier in bass fishing is those suspended fish, and it is definitely a must if you're going to target those suspended fish, because a lot of those fish have never even seen baits before. But with that said, talking more about the baits, the A-rigs, the glide baits, the jerk baits, the crankbaits. Now you can cast out and see in real time, oh, my crankbait's only getting down to 16 feet. It's not hitting that 18-foot rock that I want to hit. Maybe I need to go down a line size. Same thing with jerk baits. But more importantly with jerk baits, 100% of the time in cold water, I'm throwing the Mega Bass, the 110, either the +1, the junior +1, or the +2. Typically, you know, there's 3 or 4 or 5 different jerk baits that I throw throughout the year. The Re-Range, the Lucky Craft, and those are awesome, awesome jerk baits, but those are more of my spring and fall time jerk baits. If I'm fishing in the winter time, I'm going with the Vision 110. Like I said, either the 110, the 110 +1, the +2, the junior +1. It just tends to suspend better. It's more of a naturally buoyant bait, and I'm having a longer cadence between my rips and pauses in the wintertime. You know, with that Re-Range, you're getting real aggressive with it, and a lot of times in the wintertime, colder water, those fish, they're looking up and they won't come that, you know, 12 to 15 feet to get that bait that's moving really quickly. But if you rip, pause, and let this bait sit there for 10, 12, 15, 20 seconds, those fish will slowly come up to it and eat it. So wintertime, pay attention to how fast and aggressive you're working your jerk bait, and slow down. Give it some pauses. Give those fish a chance, especially in clear water, a chance to find that bait and make their way up to it. And again, with the live, seeing them pause, the bait pause, and them coming up and eating it is just really, really cool. But again, paying attention to how fast you're working your jerk bait, but the 110 is a must wintertime. Now, another tip for you. I don't want to go too deep down into this rabbit hole, but playing with suspend dots, I'll link them down below in the video description, and changing how your bait sits in the water, and changing if it slowly floats, slowly sinks, that sort of stuff. You can adjust the weight of your jerk bait, because believe it or not, with the changing water temps, your bait becomes more and less buoyant. And like I said, I'm not gonna go too far down that rabbit hole, but there's been times where I've filled up my bathroom sink and had a thermometer and changed the water temps and added suspend dots to try and figure out which temps my bait, you know, slowly rose, was neutral, or sank, or fast sank. But again, you can go down that rabbit hole, but pay attention to water temps and buoyancy of your jerk bait. The last thing that I want to talk about jerk baits is your line size. Again, I'm fishing a jerk bait anywhere from 8 to 16 pound test, depending on what I'm fishing around and how deep I want that bait to go. Obviously, the lighter line, the deeper that bait's gonna go, but I don't necessarily want to go super deep if I'm fishing over submerged woods, standing timber. You know, I want that bait to suspend right over the treetops. So I might jump up to 12, 14, 16 pound test. So be cognizant of your line size, because that's gonna change the actual diving depth of your jerk bait. Again, reaction baits, wintertime is so much fun. You know, you can have the time of your life catching a ton of fish. Again, there's a lot less anglers out on the water. And believe it or not, the fish can be aggressive in cold water. Let's go ahead and talk about the crankbait. You know, we've talked about it now for several years, talking about speed cranking. You know, the opposite of pausing and slowing down with the jerk bait, because you're not deflecting, you're just kind of suspending that bait in that fish's face. The complete opposite with the speed crank. You know, you can go take your favorite crankbait out there, throw it on a 7-to-1 or an 8-to-1 gear ratio reel, grind that thing, and you might have some success. But there's some really key baits on the market that really key in, that have a nice tight wobble and really, really shine in these cold weather, cold water months. The Mega Bass, the Deep X300, the Deep 6, the Tactical DD. We designed this bait specifically for it. Those of you guys have been following us for a long time know burn, pause. It's all about tapping into that bass's predatory instinct to chase down and eat. Even if it's not hungry, even if it's not in a feeding mood, when you can tap into their natural instincts, you can have magic happen out on the water, and it really, really shines in these cold water months. So we're gonna talk about speed cranking real quick because it's one of the, now to the beginning of spring is really what this bait is made for. So grab yourself 10, 12, 14 pound test, depending on the depth you want, a 7 and 8 gear ratio reel, and you're gonna burn, 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 pause. It's getting real aggressive. Adding those burns and those pauses is really what triggers those fish into eating. But it's all about speed with the crankbait. You know, I'm out here. You can see all this stuff, man. I'm changing hooks. I just put them right here. Changing out hook. Here's the rock crawler. That Spro rock crawler is an awesome cold water, cold weather crankbait. Changing out hooks. But again, speed kills with the crankbait, especially when you're deflecting. You hit something, give that thing a pause, let that bait kind of back up, and you will have a ton of success right now throwing a crankbait. The other tip, change out your hooks. You know, either some kind of EWG or just a traditional round bend. I'll link some of my favorite hooks down below in the video description, but typically it's an Owner ST36 or a Gamakatsu EWG. If they're really eating the bait, I'll go with that EWG style hook on the jerkbait, on the crankbait, tilted in, angled hook points. Just helps keep those fish hooked when they start jumping. Lighter line, it's just easier. But if they're just slashing at the bait, then you're gonna wanna go with the round bend, the Owner ST36s. And then these guys right here, these are their 150 degree angle crankbait hook. Those are awesome as well. So just right now, it's the time to change out your hooks, change out your gear, make sure you're taking care of everything, but be thinking about fishing, be thinking about reaction fishing, and hopefully these tips help you guys. So we talked about A-rigs, we talked about jerkbaits, we talked about crankbait. Let's talk about blade baits. The blade bait is the other bait that is a must. It's always tied onto my rod, especially this time of the year. You know, it's a silent lipless crank, right? So you throw it on lighter line, 10, 12, 14 pound test, but you're not getting that real loud rattle like you would out of an LV500 or a TN70. It's more of a subtle bait. You know, the original Silver Buddy was created for cold water. Just lifting your rod tip just enough to feel that bait flutter and then fall back down. Flutter, fall back down. Couple things that I do on all my blade baits. I change out the hardware. Split rings and hooks. These guys specifically have a really specific hook. This is the Owner STX38. It's a heavier wired hook, more stout, doesn't bend out as easily as the stock hooks. And then I'll actually, if I'm throwing if I'm throwing some kind of craw pattern or bluegill pattern, crappie pattern, baby bluegill, something like that, I don't do it. But if I'm throwing a bait fish pattern, I will throw a little bladed hook on there. That's actually the one by VMC. But it just adds a little bit of flash, a little bit more vibration, and had a lot of success with adding that to my blade baits. But again, guys, if you're throwing reaction, don't leave home without a blade bait this time of the year, because those fish are crazy. They're chasing the shad. You know, if you get those really bad cold storms, a lot of lakes, a lot of fisheries will have a shad die off. It just gets too cold and those fish die. So, hopping a little bit of a blade bait on the bottom looks like a dying bait fish. You know, you could have some of the best days of the entire winter throwing a little blade bait on the bottom, just hopping that thing, mimicking a dying bait fish. What else? Glide baits. So we talked about it a little bit ago, but I can't get over all those teeth marks on this guy right here. This is actually the Warden color. It's a color that Matt and I designed several years ago, but this is the S-Waver 200. A lot of great glide baits on the market. Typically this time of the year, I'm throwing a 200 size or bigger glide bait, but that's not what I want to talk about. What I want to talk about is changing out your hooks, either 1X, 2X, 3X hooks to change the sink rate of your bait. You know, a lot of times these fish are deeper water, like I said, this time of the year. And to be honest, a lot of fish that are deep don't see glide baits because it takes patience and it takes time for that bait to get down in that zone, in that depth where those fish are at. So if you're a guy that's on a highland reservoir and you can, you know, you're seeing fish on the graph that are suspending out there in 20 feet, 25 feet, over 50 or 40, whatever it may be, try going with a larger hook, a larger wire diameter hook. This is an ST, what is it, 56? I will link it down below in the video description. It's their 3X hook. I don't want to misquote it. 3X, 1/0, adds a little bit of weight. You can do the same thing with suspend dots, either on the back or on the belly, but this thing's gonna fall a lot quicker. So now I can fire this thing out. Like I said, highland reservoir, those fish are suspended. I can fire it out off that main leg point, count this thing down, or see it now on the forward-facing sonar to the depth that I want, and now I can fish it deeper than a lot of guys will actually fish a glide bait. Guys, right now, those big fish are wanting to feed up. They're looking for a big meal. You know, I know Matt talked about it in a recent video about now is the best time. These are the baits to throw to catch the biggest fish of your life. And it's true. You know, these little tips will help you guys catch more fish. If you're looking for big fish, throw those bigger baits. But the A-rig, the jerk bait, the blade bait, the glide bait, the crankbait, those are my top 5 baits to throw this time of the year. And you know, those little tips, those little nuggets of information hopefully help you guys have more confidence, believe in the baits, believe in that confidence, in our confidence, and will help you guys catch more fish and put them in the boat. If you guys have any questions, please leave those down below in the comments section. I will try to get to those as soon as possible. But Happy New Year. Remember to go out and get those fishing licenses. A lot of those states, they're a calendar year, so they end December 31st. So check on the state that you're fishing. But guys, get out there. Don't be afraid to try reaction baits this time of the year. You know, if all else fails, you can go drag your drop shot, drag your jig, your Ned rig. But give these baits, give these tips a try, and I think you guys will have success. As always, guys, thanks for watching. If you learned something, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and we'll talk to you soon.